In the Black Girls with Queen, I wanted to give a shout out to Ring IQ Boxing, and remember to tune in to the motherfucking relay.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, the WBA has denied Yordenis Ugas' request to face Errol Spence Jr. on February 22nd, 2022 to unify welterweight titles, and it has instead ordered him to face number one contender Eimantas Stanionis immediately. The sides have 30 days to reach a deal. The WBA have now insisted Yordenis Ugas must defend his WBA welterweight title versus Eimantas Stanionis next, despite his request to fight Errol Spence. WBA prioritizing their four-man tournament to unify their super and regular belts over a three-title WBA, WBC, and IBF unification. And these tweets, these reports, they are misleading because it's not an either-or situation. If Yordenis Ugas had it in writing that Errol Spence Jr. is next and they have a signed contract for a fight, the WBA would have allowed him to circumvent his mandatory the same way they allowed Anthony Joshua to circumvent his mandatory for what was the Joseph Parker unification match. At that time, Alexander Povetkin was the mandatory challenger for the WBA title, and Anthony was allowed to skip him because he had it on paper he's about to unify.
If Ugas had it on paper that Spence is next,
The WBA would have allowed him to circumvent the four-man tournament and go ahead with the unification match because they would have had confirmation
that Spence is next.
Moreover, this isn't an either-or situation. It isn't either you fight Stanionis or you fight Spence. You can fight them both. There's ample time to do so. There's ample time to get another fight in this year towards the end of it and kick off next year with that Errol Spence fight, provided you make it through the Stanionis fight.
Sounds like what Ugas wants to do is sit on his hands.
And the WBA isn't about to let him do that. The WBA, who is under pressure, they're straightening up their act. Gilberto Mendoza stated, after listening to the parties involved, we ratify that Yordenis Ugas and Eimantas Stanionis have 30 days to negotiate. We watch over public perception of our sport. At featherweight, Lee Wood, regular champion, will have a mandatory fight against Michael Conlon, and the winner must face Leo Santa Cruz. At cruiserweight, Arslan Gulamarian, super champion, has a mandatory fight against Alexei Igorov, gold champion, and they will fight at the end of November. At super bantamweight, Mutajan Akhmadaliev, super champion, will have a mandatory fight against Ronnie Rios. Chocolatito and Estrada will have a rematch, but the winner must fight Joshua Franco. At 108 and 105, there will be a tournament. At heavyweight and super middleweight, we will soon make announcements. We are reviewing category by category. And this is no secret. This is no new news. The WBA is under pressure from the Alphabet Commission to get things shaking, rattling, and rolling and eliminate these trinket titles, these secondary belts.
Part of that is mandating fights.
Mandating fights between super and regular and or interim champions. The WBA is cleaning up their act, and for the longest time, I thought that's what people wanted them to do. Wanted them to order fights promptly, wanted them to phase out these secondary titles. That's what they're doing. This news, by way of the WBA, is being received with mixed reviews. There are some people that feel like the WBA is standing in the way of a big unification match, but when you think about it, this big unification match that was supposed to happen next year, in February, towards the end of it, the Stanionis fight don't get in the way of that because there's still time this year to get rid of that guy. You get rid of that guy this year so you can fight Errol Spence Jr. next year. What's the problem? Ugas has only been in action once, the entirety of 2021. I mean, God forbid that a reigning world champion have to fight more than once a year.
Right?
It seems like people aren't thinking about this with a clear head. I don't think they are, because the Stanionis fight and that tournament, it don't take the Spence fight off the table. There's still enough left of 2021 that he can take care of Stanionis in a timely fashion, and moving forward, get it in writing that you want to unify with Errol Spence Jr., because I think that's the nature of the problem. The nature of the problem is he ain't got it on paper that Spence is next, because if he did, they would have provided him...
Would have provided him an exception to the mandatory.
Would have had to, preemptively, touched base with the Errol Spence Jr. people, collaborated with them, and then shown the WBA that they are working in tandem with each other to make a unification match. early next year. Wait, looks, what these people are really arguing in favor of is more inactivity. More inactivity from a champion that has only fought once the entirety of this year. That's what they're arguing in favor of. What they seem to want is for Ugas to skip out on this tournament, even though the Spence fight ain't done.
And there's still plenty of time this year for him to take care of Stanionis.
If the WBA were to let Yordenis Ugas have his way, he'd sit out the remainder of this year because of a fight that isn't done, a fight that hasn't been made yet. What do you think I'm talking for? You think I don't want to see the unification match? You think I got something against that proposition? I don't.
Ugas wants to sit on his hands.
That's what all of this is really about. He wants to take the rest of the year off, sit on his hands, even though he has an outstanding mandatory. Fighting Eimantas Stanionis late this year in 2021 does not stop Yordenis Ugas from orchestrating a fight with Errol for early next year, early 2022. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. It's not either or. You can take care of this guy, have your people work on the Spence fight afterwards, and get that done so going into 2022, you can skip out on what remains of the four-man tournament.
Your problem is the Spence fight ain't done yet.
And what you want to do is sit out the rest of this year, preserving yourself for that Errol Spence Jr. fight. And you know what? I am against that. We got enough inactive fighters, especially on your side of the street. Enough inactive champions that we don't need another one.
WBA finally starts doing their job and these people are complaining.
Consolidating trinket titles to eventually phase them out. Ordering mandated fights with mandatory challengers in a timely fashion. Yordenis Ugas, by way of his own comments, his own gripes, his own complaints, asked why he's the only WBA super champion that's being ordered to satisfy a mandatory when he's not the only WBA super champion being ordered to satisfy a mandatory. He is one of several WBA super champions that are under orders.
Hey, you can't skip out on an order with a fight that ain't made yet.
Because if the fight were made, they would have given you an exemption. But it's not made, so here we are. In other news, Sam Jones, who handles the careers of Joe Joyce, Johnny Fisher, he very recently chimed in on Anthony Joshua's American tour of gyms. You know, he's obviously in the market for something new. And Sam stated that just airing all his business and plans, I very much doubt he's been authorized to say this by AJ or his team, he being Ronnie Shields.
Fucking weasel.
He looks like one. I mean, what kind of dickbag move is it to have somebody come to you,
For help.
tell you things in confidence, so that you can impart all of that to the media as soon as he tells you?
It's a real piece of shit thing to do.
And I'm glad that I'm not the only one that noticed. I highlighted this in passing in my previous video regarding just the same subject, that Anthony Joshua, he's in the market for a new trainer. I don't actually think that Ronnie Shields would have been a good fit. I don't think very much of Ronnie Shields. I can think of at least 3, 4, maybe even 5 of the guys that would be a better fit for Anthony Joshua and the assignment ahead of him that would be better choices than Ronnie Shields. It appears that Sam Jones noticed the same thing that I noticed, that it's a little bit unprofessional for you to go...
If you're gonna work with this guy, why would you make that known to everybody?
What it is he plans on doing, his plan of action moving forward, that he means to be a lot more aggressive in the second fight with Alexander Usyk than he was in the first. If you're going to be working with him or aspire to, why would you communicate that vital information to the media? The only silver lining there is that the very talkative Ronnie Shields may have taken himself out of the running to work with Anthony Joshua moving forward by being as unprofessional as he was, because that's what that is. That's unprofessional, and that's a downright dickbag thing to do. We're seeing images of Anthony Joshua visiting the Robert Garcia gym. Robert Garcia...
He's a good trainer.
Oh, Robert, he doesn't really train heavyweights. I vaguely recall seeing a video where Robert explained that, characteristically, he don't train the big men. So, I mean, I'm not sure that Robert would be a good fit for Anthony Joshua, especially given this assignment. I'll go as far as saying that Jonathan Banks might be someone he wants to consider. Someone from the Kronk School of Boxing. Jonathan Banks, Ismail Salas, Buddy McGirt, Joey Gamache. Joey Gamache, who in recent memory has helped at least 2 fighters work around a very crafty boxer, very crafty boxers, southpaws. He helped Otto Valine get ready for that Tyson Fury fight, and we all know that Otto Valine gave Fury a better fight than Wilder did his last 2 fights. We also know Joey Gamache helped Teofimo Lopez get ready for the Lomachenko fight. And Teofimo Lopez, he secured the W. He won the match.
None of those guys are as unprofessional as Ronnie Shields.
That fucking blabbermouth. I mean, you didn't hear Buddy McGirt carrying on to the media about working with Callum Smith until it was made official, until they decided to work together moving forwards. You didn't see Buddy McGirt run into the media to tell him everything that him and Callum talked about, did you?
Not until it was made official.
Yeah, Joey Gamache. He helped Teofimo Lopez prepare for the Vasyl Lomachenko fight, and you didn't see Joey Gamache imparting vital information to members of the media to get his 15 minutes of fame in the buildup of that fight as he was helping Teofimo prepare for the match. You didn't see him do that. You know why? Because that's fucking unprofessional. That's why.
I really don't know what he was thinking.
It's just that he wasn't thinking because he was so starstruck to have someone of the stature, Anthony Joshua, visiting his humble little gym with his humble little fighters.
Maybe that's what it was.
I'll tell you now what may come of all of this is that, Ronnie's no longer in the running for the job because you can't keep your trap shut.
That's a good thing, because I don't think he was right for it anyway.
In other news, we have some broadcast information for this week's inaugural Bridgerweight title fight between Oscar Rivas and Ryan Rozicki. It's going to be streamed live on ESPN Plus for those of you here stateside that are subscribed to Plus. Streaming action begins 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard. Yvonne Michelle is the lead promoter for this event. Yvonne Michelle, Canadian-based promoter that works with Oscar Rivas, Salater Alvarez. He's going to be the lead promoter for Artur Beterbiev's upcoming fight, also set to go down in Canada. It's obvious by now that Yvonne Michelle is in bed with Top Rank. They are their U.S.
They're partner on this side of the border.
sharing and, in some instances, co-promoting fighters. Lest we forget, Kim Clavel of Canada is an Yvonne Michelle fighter, though last year she did make an appearance on a top-ranked card featured on ESPN here stateside. Artur Beterbiev, as we all know, he is a top-ranked fighter, one of their champions, unified. But his next fight, the lead promoter for it,
It's not actually top rank.
look where the fight is taking place. In the Bell Center, Montreal, Canada. Yvonne Michelle's neck of the woods. He's actually the lead promoter for that thing, though we're going to be seeing it here on ESPN by way of Top Rank. On that card, you're going to see certain of Yvonne Michelle's other fighters. Marie-Eve Dicaire, former IBF junior middleweight champion Marie-Eve Dicaire, who is rumored to be fighting for what could be the newly vacated IBF title. That's right. There's talk of that going around. Kim Clavel, who I mentioned earlier, she's supposed to be challenging Yesenia Gomez for the WBC title on that same card. This accents the partnership between Yvonne Michelle and the people over there at Top Rank, who are invested in Artur Beterbiev, and Yvonne Michelle, who is invested in not only Artur, but Marie-Eve Dicaire and Kim Clavel. And just in reference to this week's inaugural Bridgerweight title fight, Bryant Jennings had some very interesting comments in reference to that. Initially, it was supposed to be him. This was supposed to be a rematch between him and Oscar. Bryant didn't like the terms of engagement. He didn't like the conditions. It has since been revealed that what Bryant would have made for the fight was something to the tune of $200,000. $200,000 for a title fight. I mean, these ain't bantamweights and flyweights we're talking about. These are two former big men. And what this accents is what I told you guys before. This fledgling division's survival hinges on how much money can get poured into it. Because this is prize fighting after all. And if the prizes aren't to the fighter's fancy, guess what? This division don't get off the ground. I think those big guys are going to want to have to go through a weight cut for prices that are something to the tune of $200,000 or $300,000. This is what Bryant Jennings was going to get for the fight. Bryant Jennings, who lost him and Oscar's initial meeting, their first fight. It's conceivable that Oscar is getting a little more than this, him being the house fighter. Yeah.
There are bigger paydays at heavyweight.
You're telling me a WBC Bridgerweight title fight gets a guy $200,000. That's it, $200,000. The only saving grace for this division, I think, is that Given the pressure that the WBA has been under by way of the Alphabet Commission, the WBA having to consolidate, phase out most of their trinket titles, they don't have that arm of revenue anymore. So what they might do is fall in line with their sister organization, the WBC, and come up with a WBA Bridgerweight title of their own.
It's a possibility.
That could happen because the WBA doesn't have as many secondary titles in circulation to generate revenue from anymore. So what they might do is fall in line with the WBC's new division in order to get sanctioning fees from that weight class. That might happen. For now, the inaugural WBC Bridgerweight title fight is set to go down this Friday, and you can watch it on ESPN Plus here stateside. And finally, per a tweet from Mike Coppinger via his sources, the Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos lightweight championship fight will take place November 27th at New York's Hulu Theater at MSG on DAZN. Finally, at long last, this fight might actually happen, story coming to ESPN. And given what's going on with the Dillian Whyte versus Otto Wallin card, rather what might not be going on, that card itself, it might get outright canceled. All of those fighters, all of those fights. The timing of this news could be beneficial. I mean, if Mary McGee versus Chantel Kimron can't happen next week, maybe it can be rescheduled for Lopez versus Kambosos. Maybe the same might ring true for Ellie Scottney of Cotford, a personal favorite of mine.
If next week's card ends up getting canceled,
maybe some of those fighters that were set to make appearances on that card can make their appearances, have them rescheduled for Lopez versus Kambosos Jr. I'm not sure that at this time the undercard for Lopez versus Kambosos is set. So this would be a golden opportunity to get those fighters out there if they can't get out there next weekend. We don't yet know what's going to happen with the card. We're hearing that Dillian exacerbated an injury in his shoulder or something, and that's what led us to where we are. There are still a lot of people that are very suspicious in reference to all of that this could be strategy on Dillian Whyte's part as to not put himself in harm's way when he's already got the Fury fight. He doesn't need to go through Wallin in order to get it.
because this ain't a mandated fight.
These guys weren't under orders to fight each other. This wasn't an according to Hoyle WBC final eliminator that was ordered.
Dimitri Salita wants that fight rescheduled.
Though I hardly think that's going to be the case moving forward. Dillian pulling out of this fight essentially fast-tracks him to a Tyson Fury showdown, whether he's injured or not. And I have no doubts that that's where the focus has shifted to. I feel for Otto, I do, because a week out from the fight, he's had a complete camp. I think Eddie Hearn should look for a way to compensate him. Maybe he can get him a slot on the Lopez versus Kambosos undercard, since Matchroom has the rights to it. But as far as that Whyte fight, I think that ship has sailed. In reference to Lopez versus Kambosos, the fight itself, well, it's finally here. It's been a running gag up until this point. The fight itself was more of an afterthought.
First bid for the fight got more attention than the fight did.
A lot of other particulars surrounding the fight got more attention than the fight itself. The fight itself is not really a hot ticket, not really a big fight. That's why it's in the Hulu Theater, the small room at MSG. The silver lining is, at least they're finally going to get it over the line.